Right, okay, perfect. So we're joined today by Rob Kearney, who has just very recently been announced as the pound for pound strongest man in the world. That's that correct?
Yeah, not too shabby, which is was pretty exciting to say the least.
Do you know, I've been thinking about you coming onto the podcast and how what would be the best way of starting. Now, you have to take my word for this that I gave this a lot of thought. Okay, you probably know what's coming, but the social media handle has to be the first place that we start. I'm sure for a number of reasons, but you go by the title of the world's strongest gay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now, fantastic. Now, the first time, I must be honest, the first time that I heard about you was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which you were a guest on, and it's fantastic that someone competing in a sport like you compete in is showing that pride and putting that message out there. So is that a place that we could start the discussion and just your feelings on that?
Yeah. For me, it was so I came out back in 2014. So I was 22 years old, and I had actually already turned pro in strongman. So I've been doing strongman since 2009, and worked my way through the weight classes. I was U90, 105, and then now up into the heavyweights. And back then I was a 105 athlete. So I won the amateur national championship in America, turned pro, and was also battling, with my sexuality throughout this entire time.
Yeah.
I, lived the quote unquote heteronormative kind of lifestyle. I dated a girl for a little while and realized I wasn't happy whatsoever, and ended that relationship because I really wanted to find myself and figure out what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And was fortunate enough to actually, meet my husband, Joey, at that time. And so let's see, I think back, it was the Arnold in 2015. I was competing in the amateur world championships as a heavyweight, and I broke the amateur heavyweight log press world record.
Yep.
And so that was kind of a big moment in my career because I realized that I could, possibly compete with the big guys. And back then my Instagram handle was only, just I think Rob Kearney, like pretty basic.
Okay.
And it was at that moment where like I started getting a little bit more traction on social media and, kind of looked at the bigger picture of what I was doing, and, kind of made the decision to change my Instagram to World's Strongest Gay. And that really is just to kind of, my biggest motivation is kind of twofold. To kind of show everybody and reshape what people think gay is.
Yep.
Because I think, there's this stereotype of what gay men are, how they should act, how they should dress and all this stuff. And, I don't fit into that mold whatsoever.
Yep.
So, and on the other side of that, it really comes down to, and where my big push has been lately, is showing LGBTQ visibility in sports, and specifically professional sports.
Yeah.
I think if we look across the gamut of the major sports across the world, there's really no openly gay men competing at the highest level.
Yeah.
There's a professional golfer that is openly gay. On the women's side, there's a ton. We have Megan Rapinoe, Sue Bird, Billie Jean King, like all these amazing female athletes who came out. And I feel like that is, considered more normal. I think, fitting the lesbian stereotype of athletic women is really, I don't think people are too surprised. But when they see a gay man, competing in arguably the most hyper-masculine sport in the world, and now being crowned, the pound for pound strongest man in the world, it really is, I think, super important to just show everybody that just because of your sexuality, it won't put limitations on things that you can achieve.
Yeah. I mean, when we started the Martial Focus podcast, our my intention was really just to focus on martial arts, and then it very quickly moved into covering things like mindfulness, yoga, mental health, and it's kind of just grown arms and legs, which has been fantastic. And then I heard yourself on Joe Rogan, and this part that we're discussing at the moment really sort of resonated with me, and I thought your accomplishments in the sporting world are obviously fantastic, but this element of your story to me was just as interesting and just as inspiring as the records that you hold and the lifts that you do, etc., etc. As Isn't it a shame that this is still required? But I mean,
Yeah, I guess to a point it is. I think it is. But it's also needed still.
yeah,
Just a couple of weeks ago, I put up a post on my Instagram showing the amount of hatred and you know bullshit, for a lack of better terms, that I
yeah,
go through on a daily basis on social media,
yeah,
and it just goes to show that, like, the LGBTQ community isn't fully accepted still. It is not normalized like we want it to be. So, people like myself that kind of wear our pride on our sleeve and make it a known fact that no matter where I go, I'm an openly very proud gay man with an amazing husband, and I'm one strong dude as well.
yeah,
I think it is just really important. It's like I said, I get all these messages of hatred and, comments on my posts on literally, like I said, on a daily basis.
yeah.
And actually today is my husband and I's 6-year anniversary. So I'm going to be putting up a post
Fantastic.
about that today.
Happy
Um,
anniversary.
what was that?
Happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Um, but the flip side of that is I guarantee, because I'm going to post something about my husband, I'm going to lose a few thousand followers today.
Yeah,
And there's going to be a ton of hate messages, horrible comments on the picture. And it's kind of horrible to say, but I've come to expect that with every time I post something like this.
yeah,
um, but on the flip side of that, I get some of the most amazing and inspiring messages I've ever received as well.
yeah,
um, when I get a message from a parent of an LGBTQ child who says, I didn't know how my kid was going to be able to grow up. I didn't know what to expect for their life, but seeing you and your profile and what you're doing with your life gives me hope and excitement for my child.
yeah,
Receiving a message from, a 16-year-old who was literally contemplating suicide until he found my page.
yeah,
Messages like that are more motivating and more inspiring than anything I could have ever imagined. And, I will take a million hateful messages telling me to go kill myself just for that one inspiring message, from a kid that, isn't gonna, kind of contemplate ending their life just because they're not comfortable with their sexuality.
yeah. It's over here in the UK. Our well, strongman is huge over here. Actually, when there's a lot of TV coverage and stuff, but our main sport is football or soccer, as you would know it in the States. And obviously, there's a women's football league as well. Uh, but men, even to this day, and you think it's 2020, even to this day, the amount of people who are unable to participate in a sport that they love and be who they are at the same time is, I still often think that we're not as far advanced as what we think we are. How was strongman, the whole strongman scene, I guess, when you did announce that you were coming out as a gay man?
It was absolutely amazing. Strongman is one of the sports where, it's more of a brotherhood than it is anything else. And I think it just comes down to the fact that we all realize how much hard work and pain we put ourselves through to get to this level of the sport. When you look at the competitions, there's only about 30 men in the world that are at this level that I
Yeah,
compete at. And so when I came out back in 2014, like I said before, I was actually still a 105 kilo pro. I really wasn't on this world stage just yet.
yeah,
Um, but that being said, when I came out, I still had guys like Terry Hollins messaging me, and congratulating me. Guys like Brian Shaw, and I hadn't even done these big shows yet. I haven't even met these guys yet. But just them seeing a pro strongman athlete being able to be themselves, it was nothing but acceptance from the biggest names in the sport. That being said, obviously there were still a lot of negative comments, and people coming after me. And what I realized was, even though, if those people were in the sport, they didn't understand the culture.
Okay.
Like I said, when we go to these competitions, it literally is like a dysfunctional family reunion every time we get together. It's a bunch of big dudes lifting shit. My husband and their wives and partners are, out drinking and having a good time. And then, that we're all hanging out in between events, in between days of the contests. It really is, like a family at this level of the sport. And we just all love each other and respect each other so much. So it's also a great feeling knowing whenever I get a negative comment, whether it's on the World's Strongest Man Instagram page or if it's on a Giants Live post, I know I don't have to defend myself, because those guys are going to be the first ones to hop on the post and jump down, kind of go after those people for making these horrible comments. And it's really just an amazing feeling to have that support, especially from people that I've looked up to for so long, because I'm young, I'm only 28. And when I was getting into the sport back in 2009, guys like Brian and Terry and Lawrence Chalet and all these guys they were competing at World's Strongest Man. So now to consider these guys friends and competitors and know that I have their love and support really is just like, it's like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, you must take a lot of pride in being there as someone who's leading the way as well, because the hope is that if there are people within your sport, even with that acceptance, but there might be people in your sport who you will give confidence to come out to the world, or as you've mentioned, not just in your sport, in any walk of life. You had the bravery to step out there, and hopefully you must take pride and encouragement that you're leading the way to do that, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that was one of the big reasons behind the Rainbow Mohawk at World's Strongest Man last year. It was World's Strongest Man was during Pride Month last year, in June, and I just felt like it was my first time competing at World's Strongest Man when it was in the U.S.
Okay.
So it was kind of this full circle moment where I looked at it as an opportunity to really use my platform for as much positivity as possible, and it really was just an absolutely amazing experience. And I never thought that just by proclaiming that I'm in love with another man, I would turn into this international LGBTQ sensation.
Yeah.
People would be looking to me for advice and wanting help on certain things. And the funny thing is I get messages from kids all the time that don't know how to come out, or they don't have an accepting family and they're looking for advice. And it puts me in a tough spot because I'm lucky. I had such an amazing coming out experience, and I know a lot of people don't share that same that kind of same thing as I do. But to be able to just kind of be an open ear for anybody out there that is having these difficulties, and try to show them the way that not everything is so dark and gloomy. And even though it might feel that way right now, there is a bright, beautiful future ahead. With me coming out at 22, I was already, independent. I had a master's degree at the time and was working, and, life was pretty good. So when I came out, I kind of had this big F you attitude that if you didn't like it, I don't need you in my life.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how it's been ever since. And it's a really testy kind of subject for a lot of people, because I realize there's not a lot of people that think like me in that situation. But still, like I said, being able to show everybody that when you finally get to be authentically yourself, life is so much more amazing to actually experience true love and experience real happiness. There really is nothing better than those two things.
Fantastic. Okay, so you mentioned already, you've mentioned just how an elite level you have achieved, and as far as how many people compete. I think when we watch World Strongman, for example, on the television, and it's there and you sit down and you watch it, I think it's the same as a lot of different sports where people don't realize how you actually get there in the first place. So how does one become a competitor in the World's Strongest Man?
So there's a few different ways to go about it. The easiest way is to just win World's Strongest Man, and then you get invited back the next year.
Okay.
From there, there is the Giants Live qualifying series. So Giants Live is kind of the feeder system to World's Strongest Man.
Yeah.
And competing at those competitions, if you get on the podium, so if you're top three, you had an automatic invite to the following year's World's Strongest Man. And then from there, now at World's Strongest Man, we have 25 athletes total. So that pretty much gives us about between 20 and 22 athletes. And, the final invites are typically what they refer to as wild card invites.
Yeah, yeah.
So they'll look at all of the different pro, kind of leagues in strongman. So right now we have, Giants Live and World's Strongest Man is one. We have the Arnold Series and the Arnold Strongman Classic as another. There's now World's Ultimate Strongman based out of Dubai.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of others like Strongman Champions League and Ultimate Strongman. So what the promoters will do for World's Strongest Man is they'll kind of look across all of the different venues and see who's been competing where, who's been doing really well, and give those other invites to guys that they might not necessarily have directly been qualified for Worlds, but they are deserving of a chance to kind of prove themselves on a world level and at the biggest competition in our sport. So for me, I did a few Giants Live shows back in 2008 or 2019, and then taking the American log press record. And I think my track record, is what's got me to World's Strongest Man this coming year. But, to be totally honest, I got my invite. I was one of those wildcard invites back in 2017. That's how I initially got to World's Strongest Man. 2017 was actually my first year as a heavyweight in the sport.
Yep, yep.
I was competing as a 105 athlete all the way through to 2016. In 2017, I won New York Strongest Man here in the U.S.,
Yep.
and that qualified me to compete at the Arnold South Africa in the pro show. Also in 2016, I won the Log Press World Championships hosted by Zydrunas Savickas. So I had a pretty decent track record as a heavyweight, even when I was competing as a little guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was, all of those things combined, I was fortunate enough to kind of catch the eye of Colin Bryce at Giants Live and the promoters at World's Strongest Man, and they were fortunate enough to extend me a wildcard invite to Worlds in 2017.
Fantastic. The next two questions that I have for you, we can decide what's the best order to put them in. I think probably the first one I'll ask. I think I'm really interested in hope that the listeners will be in your personal process or your personal history, I guess, from leaving college or university. How did you find the interest in the sport, and then leading through to now? That's probably question one. I do want to get on to eventually talk about the numbers on these lifts, because even when I was looking through stuff and thinking, even in pounds or kilograms, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. So, but it obviously does, because you watch the videos and there's a lot of footage on YouTube that people can look you up and see what's happening. Let's start about your personal history on how you got to a position to lift the weight that you actually lift now.
Yeah, it's been a long road. So I've actually been doing strongman for 11 years. I did my first competition when I was 17 years old in 2009. And to be honest, it was totally by chance. So I was in high school at the time, and there was a teacher that walked by who was also a CrossFit coach. So they had noticed I enjoyed working out. I was decently strong in the weight room when I was training at the school. And he was like, oh, I coach at a CrossFit gym. If you want to come by, we can work on this and, see where we can get you. So I found out really quickly that I sucked at CrossFit.
Okay.
But I just loved the barbell. I loved lifting heavy in training and learning the mechanics. So, at 17 years old, I was deadlifting over 500 pounds. So it's, a little over 250 kilos.
Yep.
Or right around 250, 240 maybe. And I walked into the gym one morning on a Tuesday, and they said, hey, by the way, there's a strongman competition this weekend. We signed you up for it. So I had never done any of the lifts. I had never, my experience with strongman was what most people is just seeing it on ESPN on World's Strongest Man,
Yep.
seeing it on TV. So I was like, all right, cool, why not? What's the worst that could happen? So I went to this contest. At 17 years old, I was the youngest athlete by probably 8 to 10 years, and I got my ass kicked. Um, I took dead last and absolutely fell in love with the sport.
Yep.
From there, I went off to uni where I, joined the powerlifting team actually. And, while doing that was really just getting a little bit more comfortable with the barbell movements, trying to get stronger under some weight. And then, did another strongman contest where I found a gym owner who was not far from, where I was going to school. And so I started training with him every single weekend. And, it's actually still the gym I go to today.
Sure.
I've been a member at that gym for 11 years now. And, I think the most important part about my come up into strongman is like, I was not good to start. It took me a long, long time. So I took dead last in the first 8 competitions I ever did.
Okay.
And it was unbelievably frustrating, but also I just really loved everything about the competitions, the people, the training, and really just tried to kind of dive into the sport head first to learn as much as I could. And I became a student of the sport pretty quickly. So, I think the reason why I got to where I am is because, I made my priority was goal setting. So after the first few competitions where I came in last, my first goal was don't come in last.
Good start. Yep.
My goal when I started the sport wasn't to, become the pound for pound strongest man in the world. It wasn't to get to world's strongest man. It was just don't come in last.
Yeah.
So I did that on my 9th competition. From there, it was don't zero an event. So at every single contest I've done, I had zeroed at least one event,
Okay.
which means I didn't get a single rep on a lift on one of the implements.
Okay.
And if you don't do a rep, you don't move the implement, you don't get any points.
Yep.
So that was my next goal, is don't zero anything. It wasn't moving up in the placing. Even if I had taken last and didn't zero, I was still going to be happy.
Yep. Yep.
So I did that on competition number 14. And then it was, okay, so I'm not in last place anymore. I'm not zeroing the events. Let's try to get a trophy for once. So then it was trying to get on the podium. And I did that on competition number 17. And that competition I actually won. And then from there, and meanwhile, all this time, I was competing under 200 pounds in body weight. So I was a U90 athlete. From there, I had a couple of friends going to the amateur national championships here in the U.S. in 2011. It was that year. So I was like, why not? I'll sign up and go, see what happens. I had absolutely no expectations whatsoever.
Yep.
Totally planned on just kind of being somebody that was there, hanging out with my friends and lifting some stuff every once in a while.
Yep.
And I ended up taking second place.
Wow. Okay.
So it, totally took me by surprise. And then it was that moment that I jumped up to the 105 class. So 2012, I went to the Amateur National Championship. And by this time, people had kind of known who I was. I had been, lifting some bigger weights. I was getting stronger throughout this entire process, getting better at competing. And so 2012, I went back to the Amateur National Championships as a 105 athlete. And in one of the most heartbreaking losses of my career, I had a 13-point lead going into the final event to win the Amateur National Championship, and I lost.
Okay.
So I took second place again, missing out on my pro card of being a 105 pro. And then, from there, 2013, won the Amateur National Championship, actually by the largest margin of victory at a national championship ever. Get that pro card, and I start competing as a 105 pro. So took second place at America's Strongest Man in 2014 and 2015. 2016 went to 105 World's Strongest Man, and also did the log press world championships in the heavyweight division.
Okay.
So I was competing against guys like Vytautas Lalas, Dimitar Sabatinov, just these massive pressers. And again, this was actually my first international competition. So I went with absolutely no expectations. It was, Joey and I going over to Lithuania for a quick weekend trip. to go lift a log and then come home and see what happened. And I remember after doing my fourth lift, Dimitar came over to me and said, "Congratulations, you won." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Because I had no idea what everybody else was lifting. I was just so engulfed in the competition and the experience and doing, I was just going out to do what I wanted to do. And yeah, so at a body weight of 112 kilos, I did a log press of 202.5
Wow.
and, won the world championships in the log press, which kind of shocked myself and everybody else there. And then a month after that is when 105 kilo worlds was. So, and it was by far the worst weight cut I've ever had in my life. I was completely miserable. I had a horrible showing at the competition. And that was the moment where I decided to make the jump up to the heavyweight class.
Okay.
And then we spoke a little bit about, 2017 winning New York's Strongest Man, going to the Arnold Africa, going to World's Strongest Man for my first time. And then it's just been a progression, through the heavyweight ranks. And, it's kind of considered one of the top 10 strongest men in the world right now.
Yeah, it's, as I said, I hope that people will, the podcast will appear on YouTube as a visual, and obviously it's on Apple and Podbean and stuff as an audio. But I hope people go and I'll imagine there'll be people who have seen you compete, but for the people who haven't seen you compete, to go and watch the videos. So let's move on to a wee talk about numbers, because when you see it, or even when you're saying the words, for us mere mortals, it doesn't register. So at the minute, you are the record holder for the log press. At what weight?
So I have two records in the log press, actually.
Okay.
So I have the 105 world record, where I pressed 186 at a body weight of 105. So that's, so for, any Americans listening, at a body weight of 231, I lifted 410 pounds. And then I also have the American log press record. So at a body weight of about 130, I just recently pressed 216.
It's one of the videos in fact, a number of the videos that I've watched of you so far, and let's have a wee chat on the technique. At most strongmen competitions that you watch on television, there's always a moment where, again, as the layman, it's going to go either way here, and you'll correct me, obviously, because technically I'll be all over the place here, but when you initially squat and roll the log onto your lap, there's this horrendous looking moment where you're in a low squat with the log, and then you roll it to the shoulder and press. That gives me the fear every time I watch it. So how do you work on the technique of that? How do you, because you're not just bench pressing, you're lifting the log or pulling a truck or lifting the huge sort of stone balls. How do you actually train the technique for those events?
Yeah, it really just comes down to finding a gym that has some of these implements. There is a resource, Starting Strongman is a great resource, and there's an ebook out of like how to train for strongman in a regular gym.
Okay.
But when it comes down to it, and especially being at this level, we just need to get our hands on the implement. And, I've spent, the past 11 years of my life dedicating 4 to 5 days a week in the gym, really just trying to perfect everything about the movements. And I think that's the only reason I got to where I am today. Obviously so for those that are listening and don't know, so I'm actually the smallest competitor on the World's Strongest Man stage right now. So I've had to make it a point to make sure that my technique is impeccable. I don't have the natural size of the Stoltman brothers or Thor or Brian Shaw.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty average looking dude when I'm walking around the street. So, I need to make sure that my technique in every event is dialed in because I don't have just the natural mass and
Yeah,
size of other guys where I can just kind of get away with doing the bare minimum and using brute strength in my favor. Um, I'm super strong, which is great.
yeah.
But when it comes down to it, I'm in the top 1% of strength athletes in the world. And, to a point, mass moves mass.
Mhm.
So I need to make sure that I'm completely dialed in and everything is working like it needs to in order for me to, still compete at this level and, really achieve some success.
I mean, even the statistic that you just gave there about being in that top 1%, as a it's an honor. It's an honor to be sitting chatting today with an actual world class athlete at the top of your sport. So it's a great opportunity for myself and people who are listening. Uh, what is your training like? Can we talk a wee bit about just a sort of Monday through Sunday
Yeah.
of your life and the dedication and hours that are needed and what you do?
Yeah. So I'll preface this by saying, living in the US has its benefits and its cons, to say the least.
Okay.
Uh, one of them being we don't have universal health care. So that means I have to have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So on top of strongman, I do work full-time. So I work 40 hours a week. Um, and so that means my typical weekly schedule is I train Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday. During the week, I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning to kind of get my first meal in and get my day started. I then, leave my house at about 6:30 and I have a 1 hour drive to work. Um, I work typically from 7:30 until about 4:30 in the afternoon. And the great thing about my job is it's the exact opposite direction of my gym, which means I have an hour and 30-minute drive to the gym after I get out of work.
Yeah.
So typically I'll head straight to the gym after work. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, that means I'm getting to the gym anywhere between, 6:30 and 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Those lifting days, I'm typically in the gym for between 2 and 3 hours, depending on what I'm doing. So Tuesday and Friday are my upper body days where, so Tuesday I'm typically doing a strongman overhead movement, whether it's log press or dumbbell, depending on the competition that's coming up. Friday, I call it my bro day,
Okay.
where it's like bench press and back.
Yeah.
So that one's a little bit quicker of a workout. And Tuesday, Thursday are my longer days, because Thursday I squat and deadlift on the same day.
Yeah.
So that's typically like a 3 hour session, which means, I get to the gym between 6:30 and 7. I do my training. I get home around 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. Shower, eat, go to bed, and, uh, Friday morning I'm up again at 5 o'clock. So it's a long day.
Yeah.
And then Sundays, today is my strongman day.
Okay.
So Sundays are my big days. These are the days I'm at the gym anywhere between 4 and 7 hours, depending on the contest that's coming up, depending on what I have to do for training, what happened during the week. If I had a bad session during the week, I might have to make up an event on Sundays.
Yeah.
So these are the days that are long, and that's pretty much how my schedule has looked for the past 11 years.
When I think this is the thing that, or one of the things that separates people, normal people, to world class athletes. When you were describing your day, when you got to 4 p.m., I was thinking I would have tapped out by now. So, well, if people are up at 5 in the morning and then they're working until 4, they're ready to go home, watch Netflix, have some dinner. But that's where your time as this world uh, top world athlete is just beginning.
Yeah, that's when the work really begins.
So what's the difference then? What's the difference between you and I? Where do you find that inspiration? Where do you find that next level? Where does it come from?
I think I've never given I've never given myself the opportunity not to do it.
Okay.
Honestly, it comes down to I don't really care how tired I am. I think from the beginning of our conversation, you can gauge that I'm pretty damn goal oriented,
Yep.
and I get obsessed with these goals. If I don't reach them, I know that means I didn't work hard enough before, and that's where it kind of all comes into play. So, like I still haven't reached my goals from 2019, where I wanted to make the top 10 at World's Strongest Man and top 5 at the Arnold Strongman Classic. And naturally, I took 11th place at World's Strongest Man and then 6th place at the Arnold Strongman Classic.
Yeah.
Uh, so to me, it just means I didn't do enough. I didn't work hard enough, and that's my biggest motivating factor going into every single training session since then. And it really just is kind of this just like intrinsic obsession and stubbornness that's been ingrained in me since I started this sport. And um, I also think it's just because I know how attainable the goals are. I know they're not far out of reach, and it pisses me off that I didn't get them when I wanted to.
Yep.
So, like I said, it just means I need to work harder and do everything I can in my power to get everything done that I need to.
When the next wee thing I'd like to chat about is the nutrition that's involved. I you look at someone, and again, I'll mention Thorn Bjornsson, who was the Mountain in Game of Thrones, and he'll be maybe someone that maybe crosses over, I guess, into the general population. When you see someone, when I look at you, I would think that your frame would be that of a strongman, but you're saying that you're one of the, if not the smallest competitor, and then, well, the Mountain, who's competing with you, is so much bigger. So, what nutrition goes into being someone of that size with that strength and endurance as well? Because if you're waking up at 5 a.m. and training until 8, 9 p.m., how do you fuel that? How does someone as big and as strong fuel that?
Yeah, so for me, I'm eating anywhere between 5 and 7 times a day, depending on what I'm training. To be honest, like I'm not one of those guys that's eating, 10,000 calories a day. Just because of my frame and my size, I don't need to. My typical daily caloric intake is anywhere between 5 and 6,000.
Okay.
Sometimes a little bit lower. Sometimes it's in the 4,000 calorie range. It really all depends. Um, and I just eat consistently. I'm eating, like I said, at 5 a.m. And then my next meal is at 9 o'clock, and then 12, and then 2:30 or 3, and then right before I get to the gym, and then again when I get home. So just spacing out the meals to really just kind of maintain energy levels throughout the day. Coffee is my best friend. And if you haven't, yeah, exactly. I'm sipping on mine right now, and um, I think it really, and then another big thing is just sleep, regulating my sleep and making sure, my goal is to get 7 hours of sleep every single night. And I try to keep my sleep schedule as normal as possible, even on the weekends. So, while I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the weekdays, I still get up between 6 and 6:30 on the weekends, just because I don't want to fall into this rut of, sleeping until 8 o'clock on a weekend and then really struggling on a Monday morning to get up out of bed, knowing how much stuff I have to do and get done. Because, I mentioned that, okay, I train Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but Monday, Wednesday are actually pretty busy days for me as well because I coach at a CrossFit gym. And then my husband and I also handle all of our merchandise sales for my website. So it's coming home, packing orders and shipping stuff out, and then going to the CrossFit gym and coaching. And, so it just kind of, there's never a dull moment here in the Kearney household. That's for sure.
How was, as I say, I originally had you'd come onto my radar through the Joe Rogan experience. So how was that as an experience to yourself, being on the biggest podcast in the world? And then was there changes to social media numbers and stuff? Was that a good experience for you?
Yeah, it was so freaking cool. So Joe actually started following me after Joey and I got married back in March of 2019. Arnold Schwarzenegger, he actually celebrated our wedding with us and, put up a post on his Instagram about us. And Joe started following both me and my husband at that time. So in December of last year, I, was approached by a film crew to start doing a documentary, and we needed to get some funding to get it off the ground.
Yep.
So I was like, well, like Joe Rogan follows me, and let me just shoot him a message and see if I can go on his show.
Yep.
So I slid into his DMs and completely not expecting a response whatsoever. About 5 minutes later, said, "Yeah, let's do it. Come on the show."
Fantastic.
So pretty surreal to say the least. Joe was awesome to talk with, and him and I still stay in touch. Actually, this past week when it was announced that I'm the pound for pound strongest man in the world, he shot me a DM congratulating me.
Brilliant.
And to be honest, it completely changed my entire career. Um, it brought me from about 40,000 followers on Instagram up to over 90 in about 2 weeks' time. And my sponsorship structure completely changed. I the big kicker here, and like I said, not having universal health care in the US is,
Yeah.
I make more money through strongman than I do with my real job.
Yeah.
Um, but I need that one for, just in case I get injured or
Yeah.
sick.
Of course. Yeah.
And that, really just like that all comes down to Joe. From Rogan, I was picked up by Gymshark as their first strongman athlete that they've ever had. And then I was also picked up by Animal Pack as a supplement company. And they've been around, since the 1970s. And so to now be working with two of the biggest fitness companies in the industry, Gymshark just eclipsed $1 billion as an organization.
Yeah.
Like I said, Animal has been around since the 70s, and I'm also sponsored by SBD. So just really being now supported by some of the best companies in the industry really is all because of being on that podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. As I say, it's to be on, just experience that being on the the biggest podcast in the world. It's a reflection on yourself. I've got one more question. I don't want to keep you too long. One observation I would like to make is that since I got in touch with you, you've been an absolute gentleman, and I think that's a reflection on yourself as a person and on your character as well. Because I heard about you on the biggest podcast in the world, and the way that you've interacted with me on what's probably at the moment the smallest podcast in the world is as a reflection on yourself, to be honest. So thank you for that. Okay, last question is we just kind of talked about goals and having that challenge all the time, but what's your career goal? What's the ultimate goals, not just for a season or a year, but looking back? And how long do you want to compete for? How is that something you think about? Or
so I'm 28 right now. And my husband and I have had the conversation. I kind of said 35 is when I'm going to take a step back and kind of evaluate what I've done in my career, where I've been, and the kind of the things that I've done. I've also said, if I win World's Strongest Man, I will retire on the spot.
okay.
If I win that competition one time, I'm going to go out. I'm going to pull an Eddie Hall, go out on top, and never compete again. Just because I know how difficult it would be for somebody like me to go back and recreate that a second time. For guys like Brian Shaw, it's going to be a little bit easier because you're 6'8", 440 pounds, and you just have that natural ability. But if I were to win, I would just take the trophy and peace out. That being said, winning World's Strongest Man isn't my ultimate goal. I obviously I'm going to train for it, and I would love for it to happen. But my biggest goal in my number one career goal is to leave a positive legacy of love, happiness, and then just like really positive work ethic. I think if people can look back on my career and say, you know, this was an awesome dude. He worked his ass off to get where he is. And really nothing ever really got him down, and just a consistent competitor. And, you know, I kind of pride myself in being, you know, named the fan favorite at a few different contests. You know, and to me, that is more important than any trophy that I can win. You know, the titles they'll come and go. But, you know, if I can be known as just a great person, a great athlete, and leaving a really positive legacy, that to me is more important than a trophy.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, as I say, it's early in the morning, or just going on to just before 10 now, where you are in the States at the moment. So I will let you get on with your day. Thank you, Rob. As I say, from the very first contact that I made with you, you've been an absolute gentleman. So I appreciate that, and obviously wish you every success and happiness in the future.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Rob. That's been fantastic. Have a
You
great
got it.
day.
You
Take
too.
care. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.